Are Christians who believe there are only two genders, male and female, now members of the KKK? It seems an Albemarle school board member thinks so. Plus, Governor Youngkin takes bold action to protect girls' sports. And last but not least, we've all heard about the red pill. But should Christians be white-pilled, choosing hope and courage in today's cultural chaos? That's the challenge from the Bully Pulpit's Andrew Walker. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome everyone. Glad to have you with us for another episode of Speak Up Virginia. As promised last week, we are bringing you the conclusion of the Bully Pulpit's Andrew Walker talk that we shared before. And stay tuned because this is the hope part of everything he talked about with the cultural chaos. But before we get into that, once again, we have breaking news updates. This has all been exploding over the last several days. And this is regarding you being invited to speak. It all started with a simple invitation for you to speak at a high school Turning Point club. Tell us where this is at now.
Yeah, last week we mentioned to you all that I had been banned or canceled, that the event couldn't proceed at lunchtime because I was disruptive. Well, anyway, our lawyers went to work, and folks have probably heard the update that, in fact, the school had to reverse themselves. They were engaging in what was very clear viewpoint discrimination, so they reversed themselves. But it made people mad. So the newest update is we have a school board member, Allison Vick Spillman, who has gone on social media. She's done a rant, and her rant basically said, and maybe people, heard all this, but there's been an update to this update.
Yeah.
So her first rant, you might recall, said, I'm livid. I'm a parent of a trans kid, and described us, both me and the club, as the KKK. Well, she got a ton of backlash, ton of pressure, even calls for her resignation. So she issued a clarification.
Yeah.
So
and again, like you said, the school board recognized their free speech issues here.
So they were stuck.
You were going to be able to speak.
Yes.
And it's like they were trying to put the fire out, and she just came in and poured some gasoline on with this crazy post. So I'm going to we're going to put it on the screen. And then for those of you that are audio only, I'm going to also read it. So let's see what she said here. The Turning Point USA Club is having a speaker to come to their club meeting during lunch to speak about two genders, one truth.
Two genders, one truth. Where's the scare music? Go ahead, keep going.
As a school board member and a proud parent of a trans student, I am beyond livid. In my opinion, this is not a matter of free speech. It's hate speech and has no place in our schools. If the KKK wanted a speaker during lunch, would we allow that as well? I also believe it violates school board policy. If this makes you angry too, then I encourage you to email our school board and the school administration and let them know shame on Albemarle County Public Schools.
Yeah, so if it does violate the school policy, then the school policy violates the U.S. Constitution because they have to allow equal access. They have to allow two different viewpoints. They have the Gender Sexuality Alliance meeting at lunchtime talking about the same topic.
Yeah, so, it's just hard to know where to start with all that is wrong with this post. I mean, first of all, I don't know if this is the first time you've ever been called the KKK.
No, I wish it were, but that has happened before. But maybe not by school. But I do feel like a public official using that is new.
Southern Poverty Law Center, maybe, or something like that.
I'm trying to remember. Okay. It was a while ago. It's been a while. So at least I've gone a few years, in between.
I mean, the scary part of this is that you have a school board member saying that to speak biological fact, that there are two genders, male and female.
That we hope they're speaking down the hall in the biology class.
So they're saying speaking biology facts that we have all recognized for millenniums is hate speech. Not to mention, apparently, she thinks biblical sexuality, if you believe what the Bible says about sexuality, man, woman, male, female, that you are KKK. I mean, I don't know what else we're supposed to assume from this.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't think there's any question. And I'm glad that the community sort of rose up and reacted. I mean, she's gotten a lot of reaction to this. Because there's a lot of people who believe the exact same thing. By the way, all the people of pretty much entire history and all civilizations up until very recently. And even in Charlottesville. I was pleased to see that even in Charlottesville, which is not known as the most conservative area of the state, we had lots of people in Albemarle County saying this was absurd. So that was good.
And I do think it is important to speak up, and we can do so in a truth and grace way, like a bold way, sticking to biological fact in a loving way.
And it forced her to have to at least make a public statement, at least sort of, now I can't use the word retract because she didn't retract, but she issued a statement of clarification, which I just have to say, then she basically said it would be the same as having a racist or an anti-Semite. So I'm not sure actually she got any better. She was trying to clarify, I think, that I'm name calling the speaker, i.e. me, not the students, but I don't know that that's any better.
Well, it was kind of fun when this all first broke out. You know, she has posts on her public school board page.
Yeah.
And there were hundreds of people on there saying, "We are Charlie."
Yeah.
And yeah, I believe in male and female too.
Well, the best was she deleted this post because she got so much, reaction to it. But then they just went on whatever the next posts were and just pounded her because she needs to know that she's standing in opposition to free speech. And my comment when I had to do an interview about her retraction or her clarification was that it isn't really retraction. She needs to not just retract the name calling. And not just switch name calling, which is really what she did. But she really needs to back away from this idea that we cancel all speech we don't agree with. She hasn't backed off that at all.
Right. Yeah, you cannot cancel out, like I said,
what is she afraid of? See, they're afraid of competing ideas. I mean, that is the thing that we deal with liberals leftists all the time, is that it's like they know their ideas can't stand if they're up against a competing idea. So they have to allow the totalitarian mindset to set in, and we're just going to wipe out any opportunity for.
But in this case, we would be wiping out since mankind began biological fact and the Bible, which thousands of people have followed, millions of people have followed, I said, for millenniums. So it's ridiculous. But let's just talk for a moment. I think we need to address what she says, that she's a proud parent of a trans student. I just wanted you to have a chance to comment on that, because that seems to kind of be, the setup here for this is why I'm saying this and calling this hate speech.
I do think there's been this thing where we've allowed, I think our society sat quiet for a while where people didn't know how to react when people were going through it personally, right? Mm-hmm. So we wanted to be kind. We want to be compassionate when there's a family with a child who's struggling around gender. But it is constantly wielded as a weapon of, I then have the right to tell you can't speak. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like it's being used. It's not being brought forward as we struggle through this. This affects our family. It's being brought forward as because of this, I'm going to tell you I know what hate speech is. And does that make sense?
So how would you advise Christians that encounter this in the public square that maybe don't have as much experience as you do responding to this, to how do they, interact with that?
Well, we need to be compassionate, because anyone who is struggling or has a family who is, member who has struggled, no matter whether they understand the gravity of the situation, meaning whether or not they see it the way we do, this is a struggle and this is a spiritual battle over their child. So we need to react first that way. But then secondly, we need to understand that doesn't entitle them to have the only opinion in the room and to shut down free speech. So it's sort of this, again, grace, truth, always difficult, how to walk it, how to get it right. But we need to be, that doesn't prevent us from having to say, but the truth is this. And unfortunately, the reality is there's so many detransitioners and people who have been harmed walking through this that we don't know where her family will be 10 years from now. We just don't. And so it's a hard moment, and let's be kind but firm.
Yeah. I think that it is important, just when you encounter something like this, just to start out of the gate acknowledging we agree every single child without exception should be protected from harm. That is not on the table here. Nobody should be bullying. No one should be harming anyone. But we have to, because we love our neighbor, as you have said many times before, Victoria, because we love our neighbor, we have to tell the truth about biological fact and what is healthy for children, and we need to have an opinion about that.
Well,
and so I think that's kind of how you
a family that has a child in a school system that is so clearly trying to push an agenda. I mean, you don't cancel this event without this notion of you have one view that should go out in your school. And so you imagine the families having alternative ideas in there is so important for protecting those other kids.
Well, and that's the problem when you build entire school policies and curriculum around a transgender agenda. And that's what's happened is they'll use this thing of, well, we've got this student, so now we're reworking the entire curriculum for all of you, and you can't opt out. And so and this is especially concerning when it's a school board member not showing respect for basic facts and opinions.
And I think people need to be aware that this is probably going to be a battle that continues out there in Albemarle. It sounds like she wants to try to change policies. I don't know how they could change a policy and stay in alignment with free speech and equal access, but it looks like, there's going to be a battle. I mean, the school board meets and, it's going to be a challenge. So, we are rescheduling me to go in. I plan to walk in there at some point with the truth unequivocally and, unvarnished. And I'm going to get the opportunity to lay it out. But I think there'll be a battle around this for a while.
Yeah, so everyone be praying. Appreciate your prayers. Yeah. But we are not going to stop fighting for the truth.
Correct.
So on another front, please tell us about what the governor did the other day.
Yeah, we were so pleased to see that Governor Youngkin has issued an executive directive that instructs the state board of health to issue regulations around the issue of having girls play in their own sports and not have boys jump into what is a biological girls' sport. And so, and it also affects, of course, the private changing areas, locker rooms, all of this goes together. And so he stepped forward. Now, the Board of Health had started to move. We've talked about that here already. They had already, in a 14-0 unanimous decision, started to move forward on the regulations. So he's kind of jumping in with force saying, like, this is a good thing, keep going, get this done.
Yeah, and so it looks like what I'm looking at, what this actually does, it lists the regulation. He's asking for a regulation that would do two things: prevent biological males from participating in organized female-only athletic teams. So I'm kind of giving the things here that you just summarized very nicely. Prevent biological males from using designated female spaces where they're likely to be in a state of undress. So that, when I look at that, that tells me this is going to give protection for more than just students. This is women as well.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any question. The goal is that this is comprehensive and it protects our girls.
Yeah. All right. Well, he does make some very powerful statements, and I'll just highlight a couple of those because we appreciate that. The governor said in his statement, the health and safety of women and girls in sex-separated spaces, and I'll just kind of shorten this, but he says in competitions, it's in serious jeopardy due to irresponsible policies, including those that allow known sex offenders to hunt little girls in public locker rooms.
I think he's referencing Arlington right there. We've had really actual situations.
Yeah, that is a very strong statement. And then he says, it's an embarrassment and a tragedy that certain individuals continue to turn a blind eye. And, in Arlington, there had been more news about this known sexual predator. Actually, I think he had information that they found that he had information on schedules.
He was literally, there was no question he was there for a purpose other than, supposedly using the bathroom or whatever it might be.
Locker room, whatever it was.
As if it was his own need.
Yeah. All right. So, Victoria, what does this mean when the governor issues this directive? Are we done here? Can this be a done deal at this point, or do we still have stuff to go through?
I wish it were overnight, but regulations don't happen overnight. There is a whole process outlined by the law called the NORA process, and it's a bunch of steps. So the Board of Health is going to have to walk through all these steps, but it is wonderful to have the governor's support, and I do think they will work promptly through these steps because the governor has sort of put a little wind in their sails or a little push behind them. And so not quite done. And we will need to cue people in when there are some public comment periods. And truly we don't want, unelected individuals changing things quickly. So we do want the process. Like conceptually, that's good. It's just in this moment, it'd be really nice if we could snap our fingers and protect our girls.
It's definitely helpful to keep the pressure on those. So,
absolutely.
Just for the Board of Health is completely on board, but just to help keep it rolling.
14-0 is a remarkable decision that they made.
And so to help keep it rolling, regardless of what happens with the election and everything, I think it's helpful for that.
That's also the other issue is just, it will make the next governor, whoever she is, we know it's a she because we've got two female candidates, but it'll make the next governor, walking in under that pressure. Yeah.
Well, once again, everything that's happening gives us the perfect segue into the Bully Pulpit's Andrew Walker, because he talks about in this portion how we are seeing just the secularism veneer just being ripped off, and we see the chaos beneath. and how Christians can respond to that. And that's where he gets into what we alluded to last week with kind of the Jeremiah vision of getting roots in your community.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And just to remind people, if you didn't see last week or you don't know who Andrew Walker is, he is is an assistant professor of Christian ethics and public theology at the Southern Baptist Seminary.
Yeah, I think he actually serves as a dean and an associate professor.
You're right. Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
You're right. He's also a dean. So, and just a brilliant mind on these things. And most people have seen him. We don't all step into the seminary, but we do often see him in First Things and World Opinions, and maybe listen to him on the Bully Pulpit. So, folks might be familiar with him from a lot of other places.
Yeah, and we do recommend the Bully Pulpit.
Yeah,
it's awesome. All right. Well, without further ado, let's listen to Andrew.
There's that propensity to want to go out there to think, what can we change? I think the change begins at home. It begins around your dinner table. I'm getting at this because you're going to work very long hours doing something that I hope that you love to do. And you're going to need a horizon through which to understand your everyday actions. And that these small actions of faithfulness are building towards long-term faithfulness. While the culture and the world's pursuit of truth is constantly changing, God's mission and God's call is not. And that is one of the beauties of Christianity, is that it is a worldview and a moral system that doesn't change like a weather vane. It's a respecter of no tribe or allegiance. It is what it is. It provides us, and I know I've been using this term a ton, but it provides us a normativity and a script to build our lives off of, so that you may not know what your future holds, but if you're grounded in the truth, whatever the future brings you, you can interpret it and live within it because you understand truth. Now, these are all things that we probably take for granted as believers. Think about if you don't have that worldview. How do you, sociologists talk about that there are certain things that every human being needs. We need a community of friends. We need meaningful work and vocation. But we also need to have a filter or a paradigm to interpret hardship and suffering by. If you're not a Christian, what is that system? It's probably a pill or the bottom of a bottle. It's coping. But this isn't just about like individual discipleship. This relates to the cultural ecosystem and what we're called to bear witness to in the moment that we're in. And I kind of want to just give you a little personal story here. In 2013, now you'll know Ryan Anderson, president of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, one of my best friends. He and I were, and Eric Tietzel actually, in 2012, we were profiled by the New York Times. Ryan and I worked at the Heritage Foundation. Eric worked for the Manhattan Declaration. And Ryan and I had been doing some writing on, like, we were millennials, and we were saying, like, hey, like, we're millennials who still believe in the truth of what marriage is. George Will had gone on TV and said, literally, defenders of marriage they're just dying. We're aging out. And so Ryan Anderson and I wrote an article at National Review called Not Dead Yet. Here we are. And so the New York Times did this profile of us. The framework of the article was, look at these freaks. Look at these zoo-like animals and all of their antiquated religious niceties are still holding on to something that the rest of the world is just going past. Now, have we lost the same-sex marriage battle? For now, we have. For now, we have. Notice I said for now because you have long-term horizons, and individuals like Katie Faust are actually thinking about this. What does it look like to overturn Obergefell? So we lost that battle in the short term, but that was in 2012, 2013. Ryan and I had no idea what 2025 would look like. And Eric Tietzel and I, one of the things we constantly say to each other, we'll say it to reporters or whatever, and I absolutely mean this. It is better to be a social conservative in 2025 than it was to be a social conservative in 2010 or 2012. Okay? Now, why can I say that? Because in 2010, 2012, we didn't have a burger fill yet, right? We're still the cultural vanguards, right? We're still the ones with the moral majority behind us. No, like we could tell where things were going in 2012, 2013. But we said, because this point number 2 is if you have truth, truth doesn't change. We said at the time, if society does X, Y, or Z, it's going to logically entail these outcomes. If you say A, you're going to say B. And we were saying, if you say, if you remove complementarity as one of the principles of marriage, the norms of permanency and exclusivity are going to go away as well. Like that's just logically what's going to happen. And what do we get told? Oh, you're fear-mongering. Oh, you're engaging in slippery slopes. Okay. Well, it turns out that slopes are really, really slippery. Because then you have George Washington law professors write articles talking about wed leases. I believe a gentleman talked about like having a term defined, someone in here today, term defined marriages. This guy said, we should be rethinking what marriage is. Maybe you should just get married for a 10-year horizon. At the end of the 10 years, it kind of naturally dissolves, or you can re-up for another 10 if you want. But we're kind of like, yeah, we told you so. The Harvard Law Review has an article out on beginning the legal infrastructure for what they call consensual non-monogamy. Polyamory. That's why you have the New York Times in the aftermath of Obergefell talking about new terms like throuple or being monogamish. And again, we sat back there saying, this is what's going to happen. The waves of the revolution wash over the shores of the United States. And it's exactly what happens in 2025 when we have, sincerely, we have major sectors of elite society either beginning to question or oppose the trans lobby. It's happening, which should afford us the opportunity to say, well, if you're questioning this, maybe you should listen to us on these other issues and question these things as well, because transgenderism and LGB, they share a common moral infrastructure. What they share is a loss of telos, okay? And telos is a loss of nature, a loss of purpose. Homosexuality is the abandonment or denial of telos between the sexes relationally. Transgenderism is the denial of telos regarding kind of human nature. History is full of wild contingencies that you never know what will happen. Like I'll just give you a great example. Donald Trump getting shot in Butler, Pennsylvania is one of those black swan moments of history where you're like, whoa, a lot of things changed in that moment, because do you know what happened that night? Elon Musk came out in support of Donald Trump. And I have heard other people like Peter Thiel say, well, when Elon Musk said it was okay to support Donald Trump, it gave the permission structure for everyone else with money and elite status to say, yeah, we're for him too. I'm just getting at here, you don't know what's going to happen. If you don't know what's going to happen, what then are you called to in the present tense? You're called to that faith that doesn't change, to that truth that doesn't change. We're called to be a faithful witness to the truth, not just a faithful presence. You have individuals, like very well-respected Christian intellectuals. He writes a book perfectly curated for the cultural moment around 2009, 2010. He's one of the culturally acceptable type Christians because he never says anything to make anyone uncomfortable. What does he say is the mechanism by which you change the world? You change the world, he says, by climbing to elite institutions and using the power of elite institutions to basically have this elite trickle-down effect. So the argument that he's basically saying for Christians need to become elites. Okay? So what he says is one of the ways that we become elites is you don't rock the boat. Okay? If you want to be on the inside, if you want to be on the inner ring, as C.S. Lewis talks about, it means you're going to have to play on the inner ring's terms, which means to climb, you're going to have to climb on their terms, which means stay in line. Don't step out of line, because if you step out of line, you're not going to be able to influence the culture. You're not going to be able to influence that institution, and you're not going to be able to change the world, okay? This mantra of faithful presence became like the lingua franca of evangelical witness from like 2010 through 2020. And here's why the faithful presence mold is wrong, okay? It's wrong because it fails to understand the biblical storyline. In the biblical storyline, post-Genesis chapter 3, the truth does not naturally surface. Which means, in the faithful presence model, it means you're basically just trying to hang out with your arms folded and say, hey, I'm just here, man. I'm just here. I'm faithfully present. I'm not going to push my agenda on you because that's going to give me some social cost. That model was doomed to failure because it misunderstands the nature of truth living in light of Genesis chapter 3. In light of Genesis chapter 3, the truth does not naturally surface because of sin. Because the acidic effects of sin pushing back on the nature of truth. So what does that mean for us? It means that we're called to actively contend for the truth. You're not called just to be faithfully present. You're called to contend actively for the truth. So you have a quote here, one of my favorite quotes from William F. Buckley. He says this: the most casual student of history knows that, as a matter of fact, truth does not necessarily vanquish. What is more, truth can never win unless it is promulgated. Truth does not carry within itself an antitoxin to falsehood. The cause of truth must be championed, and it must be championed dynamically. The pursuit and defense of God's definition of truth is intrinsically valuable for its own sake. Here's what it means. Things become routine. I've been teaching for 6 years. Last fall, I had my first moment. There's the luster and prestige of being a professor. And then you start teaching the same class 30 times over. And you're like, okay, I'm going into the classroom to teach this now for the 31st time. Is it going to get any more fun or exciting than this? And I had a week of what I would call kind of professional malaise, where I'm thinking, man, I'm just kind of bored. I've literally been teaching this over and over and over again. Does it get any better than this? And then it dawned on me. Now, actually, what you're doing as a professor is you're standing on the shoulders of others who went before you, and you're not designed to say new novel things, because Christianity is not a faith of new novelty. Christianity is the faith once and for all delivered to the saints that we are then called to pass down in whatever arena God has called you to. So it dawned on me, well, no, actually, I am supposed to be delivering this pro-life lecture for the 31st time because Christians are pro-life. And if I don't deliver this lecture, a class is going to skip over that and they're going to get that lecture. If I do that for 2 classes, if I do that for 3 classes, I do that for 4 classes, guess what? Over time, I've just ceded tremendous moral authority because I just got tired of something. And so then a whole generation of pastors are ill-equipped to not be pro-life advocates in their pulpits. What I'm getting at all of this when I say that truth is valuable for its own sake is this idea is that it should be fulfilling. You should have joy and contentment from knowing the truth. The truth should give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I said One of my theses for this day has been it's never been a better time to be a Christian or a culture. And one of the reasons I think that's true is because we will inherently become more joyful Christians living in a hostile culture, because to be a Christian in a hostile culture forces you to know the truth at a deeper level that you wouldn't otherwise know if you just lived in this happy Christian culture. Now, I want a happy Christian culture, right? We all want that. We're longing for that. But it's when you're pressed in on all sides that Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians. When you're pressed in, what are you forced to do? You're forced to double down. And if truth is what it is, if Paul talks about, is one of my favorite verses in 2 Corinthians 4:4-6, we have the gospel of the glory of Christ shown in our hearts. If that really is the ultimate truth of the universe, it actually provides a level of truth and satisfaction and joy and delight that nothing else can provide. Things like friendship, marriage, family, children. You think about children, they're costly, they're expensive, they're inconvenient at times, but why do you love your kids? Because you just love your kids. Why do you act in the interest and defense of your kids? Because you just act in the defense and interest of your kids. Why is that? Because your kids are intrinsically wonderful, beautiful things. They're not some instrumental means to get you to some greater good. They are a self-evident basic good. The same thing is what I'm saying about truth itself. Is it gives us a reason to get up out of bed in the morning. So that the goal of Christian cultural engagement is the same as it has always been, witnessing to the truth. The Apostle Paul says in Galatians 6:9, not to grow weary. We need to hear that sometimes. As a professor, when I'm kind of like battled down with that malaise of monotony, I need to hear, do not grow weary, for in due time you'll reap a harvest, will we not? Number 5, what I think we need to do as we're pursuing the truth is to pursue holiness and make and build beautiful things that will outlast us. Whenever I do a marriage, or a wedding, whenever I officiate a wedding, I will tell the couple that what they are doing up here today in pledging themselves to the covenant of marriage is a covenant that someday will naturally pass away because of death. But I say, what's beginning here today is actually the first step in a long trajectory that you have no knowledge of where this is going. And I say to the couple, at some point, you're going to have ancestors or descendants, maybe 2 or 3 descendants down the chain, who won't know your name, but they came from you. And I say that to the couple at hand because I want them to have an eternal perspective on what they're doing. That when you're committed to the truth, you're committing yourself to things that will outlast you. Anyone been to the Cologne Cathedral in Berlin, or not Berlin, but in Germany? Does anyone know how long the Cologne Cathedral took to be built? Do you know? 632 years. 632 years to build the Cologne Cathedral. Think of the generations that went in, like someone's great grandfather. I mean, I don't know how long 600 years is. Well, a lot of family life could have gone into that. Think about the person who's like, building that cathedral at year 25. They might be seeing that much build. Think of the person 2 generations down who's built it up to 100 feet. It's going to take 600 years for this structure to reach its ultimate height. This is where building beautiful things, building lives of holiness, and committing yourself to the truth all converge on giving us a longer term horizon for why we're doing what we're doing. All right. Last thing I'll say is this, number 6, is that, we in Scripture refer to ourselves as exiles or sojourners. I'll often hear, I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and someone was talking about Jeremiah 29 and actually using it to like demotivate people to care about culture. It was really ironic. And the person said, you can't expect Babylon to be Babylon. You can only expect Babylon to be Babylon. Yeah, you've probably heard this line, right? Well, you can't expect non-believers to live like believers. On the one hand, you can. On the one hand, you can't. On the one hand, you can. We expect non-believers to not steal and kill, right? When we're talking about ecclesial judgment, church discipline issues, that's where we can say, well, you can't hold the outside accountable in the inside, but the outside world is still accountable to God's moral law. They're just not accountable to the local confines and judgment of a local church. But this person was like saying, well, you just can't expect Babylon to live like Christians. Babylon is going to be Babylon. And I'm sitting there and I'm like dying on the inside. And the first time ever in my time speaking, I spoke after someone and like directly kind of subtweeted the person. Because at the very end, I said something to the effect of, it's right. You can't expect Babylon to live like Christians. But here's something to think about. Babylon belongs to God. You know why it belongs to God? Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. I say all of this because what we're doing as Christians and Christians who are engaged in the public square is we're not imposing our morality on the world. We're not imposing an alien, arbitrary ethic on the world. What we're telling the world is that the world needs to conform itself to the design and pattern that God has stamped on the world. I don't care if the world disagrees with me. The world can't disagree with God and believe that its disagreement and willful persistence and willful throwing off of God's creation order is going to work in the long term. So what we're doing is we're trying to tell the world what is true about itself, regardless of whether the world wants to hear it or not. So this is a reminder that things can look bad. There can be opportunity for despair to run rampant. And it's okay to be sad, okay? Like when Obergefell happened, that was really sad and depressing. But despair is not in the Christian moral vocabulary. And the reason it's not is because we have a hope in the resurrected Christ. And the resurrected Christ transcends all cultures. He is triumphant. And he says he's victorious over the world in John 16:33. So if he's victorious, what then is our response as believers? The victory is his. Our response is to simply bear witness to that truth. It's to bear witness to that victory. One of my favorite quotes comes from G.K. Chesterton. He says this, he says, "The one perfectly divine thing, the one glimpse of God's paradise given on earth is to fight a losing battle and not lose it." And I think that quote like masterfully describes the place of the social conservative in this particular cultural landscape. It's always like we're on the cusp of just losing it all. And then we get a victory here or there, or we see something happen in culture where the culture is like, oh gosh, we have to self-correct here because we can't keep going down that direction. And there's never been a better time to be a socially engaged conservative Christian because you know something better, the more you have to defend it. And it's that intrinsically worthwhile pursuit of the glory of Christ that helps us understand the beauty of the truth. It produces a refined faith. We talked about red pills and black pills and blue pills, right? Like there's on social media, there's talk. So the blue pill is to just like continue living life as you've always lived it. The black pill is nothing matters. There's no truth. There's no victory. Despair and burnout, nihilism. The red pill is, well, I now see reality anew. I'm not always sure that what I thought was the case is really the case. I'm seeing this new. The red pill is fine. There are a lot of really, really red-pilled people online right now, right? The red pill is really, really popular. Let me suggest that here in this room, it might be okay to be a little red-pilled. We should actually be white-pilled, okay? White pill is the expression for like hope, glory, optimism, joy. So in a world of black pills and blue pills, red pills, choose the white pill, all right?
All right. I just love his suggestion about being white-pilled.
Yeah, it's a refreshing change. I mean, I think everybody hears about, he mentioned what the other ones were, but, everybody, red pilling is like, in all the sort of conversations around, are we woke, are we not? Have we figured out that we're being, manipulated by the media and all that stuff? Yeah.
Categories of pills.
Yeah.
Like black pills, I think, for nihilism and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hear about them once in a while, but I love the idea of a white pill that, like, ultimately we're supposed to be about hope and redemption and all the positive, the light, and just, be that source of that in our culture too, So I thought that was just fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I just want to mention to everyone, if you would like to dig deeper into Andrew Walker, he is the author of several books. We're going to put a couple of images here up on the screen. One of them is God and the Transgender Debate, which is especially relevant. And I think he has another one related to that topic coming out very soon. But he also has something for parents. What do I say when? A parent's guide to navigating cultural chaos for children and teens. So check that out if you want to hear a little bit more of his wisdom. And thank you for joining us. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do any of this important work protecting kids and girls and our freedoms. Thank you so much for joining us every week. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together, and we will see you next time.